right, so we've got several things that have been sent in to me, and I want to do sort of a reaction answer thing. Um, these were all things sent into the email, and let's see, most of them are for Instagram, which is kind of weird. So I guess that's where I hang out most of the time. But let's go. Let's take a look at some of these things and see what we can get into.
Welcome to the Warrior Mindset Podcast. We are your guide as you make your way through life, getting better 1% every day. We believe that life is lived and true victory won through adversity. Nothing easy is ever worth it. We believe in the warrior ethos and support those that choose to walk that path.
All right, the first one, and I frequent his stuff quite a lot, but it's Mark Manson. And I'm going to open this salvo up. It's him talking about David Goggins. And I recently had a conversation with someone in the gym about Goggins. They were a big Goggins fan, and I'm a huge fan of his work too. And I love him, but I would also say that you got to be careful. I think a lot of what David Goggins preaches is on the verge of overindulgence or obsession or whatever. And let's hear what Mark Manson has to say about him, and let's see if we agree.
And let me preface this by saying, like, I fucking love David Goggins. I don't know Goggins, but he strikes me as somebody who compulsively exercises. I don't think he knows how to stop, or at least
I don't either. That's kind of what I was getting at. This is cool. This was not sent in by the same person, but it was weird that it kind of came in right around the same time.
it strike from the outside. He strikes me as somebody who doesn't know how to stop. And so I think anything in your life, whether it's eating cake or smoking crack or exercising or working or partying, sex, drugs, whatever, if you feel like you can't stop and you have all these narratives around stopping, that like you're a piece of shit if you don't do it, and you're a failure, and oh my God, you'll never amount to anything. Like, that's not healthy. Like, we're used to compulsive behaviors being like very clearly and obviously unhealthy.
Right.
Whereas if you replace it with something that on the surface is very healthy and admirable, which is like running ultra marathons and fucking like doing insane workouts every day, I think it kind of slips by people that like that actually isn't discipline either, even though maybe up from the outside it looks like it is.
I think that's the point. How much of that is discipline and how much of that is obsession or addiction, or just, replacing something that's not quite there with something else, and I think you have to watch that in your life. A lot of times we'll get into something, we'll just deep dive and go all in, and what is that replacing? And I think to be a well-balanced human, we have to look at those things, and I think that's his point here, and I couldn't agree more. Though I love David Goggins and I use him for my own inspiration a lot. So this next one, Laird Hamilton, he's a pro surfer. I think he was in the Olympics too. I'm not quite sure, but he's married to Gabrielle Reese. She's been on like Rogan's podcast. He's been on there too, Rogan's podcast. But they're a well-known, fitness adventure brand couple, whatever. I know Gabby Reese was in the Olympics for sure. I could be wrong. Probably should have looked that up before I started this. But anyway, someone sent me this. We were talking about some of the black belt testing that I've done, and some peers of mine have done as well, and how it can be kind of extreme or whatever. But in some of the more extreme adventure type fitness things that I've done in the past too, even down to like Spartan races, which they're not that extreme, but depends on where you are in life and what your idea of that is. But this was interesting because they had sent me this after that conversation because they'd found it. And this is Laird Hamilton sort of explaining that what your idea of danger or extreme is, it's in the eye of the beholder, that someone else may not see it quite like that.
All right. Laird shoots the pier.
That's funny. It's interesting to observe people's reaction to perceived danger versus something that you may be comfortable with, but yet the perspective of an observer would be that and not that wasn't dangerous or there's not danger, but your relationship with the situation makes it something you feel comfortable with, and you could do it again and a lot more extreme. But the perception of that danger for the spectator is really a lot bigger. And then you do something that it doesn't even look very treacherous, and people are like, "What's the big deal?" And you're like, "What do you mean? That was like doesn't get any more. It doesn't get any more dangerous than that."
So yeah, he's shooting between the pier with his surfboard on a wave, which is pretty damn dangerous. Yeah, that's not safe at all. But the point is that your perception of what fear or danger is might not be the same as someone else. I've talked about Alex Honnold. I think I said that right. Alex Honnold a lot on this show. He's the free climber, climbed El Capitan and all that, and lots of other things. But that guy's definition of fear is probably not, or the level he operates at is probably a lot higher than the one that most of us operate at. Like a lot of people like to do skydiving and stuff like that to kind of overcome some of that and level set and then bring their level up and things like that. It's interesting. It's always interesting for me to talk to someone who would jump out of an airplane or skydive or whatever, because that's something that, as I sit here right now, I don't think I would ever do. And I've often said that, that's not in the cards for me. That is not something I would do. And, others have done it and they tell me it's not as big a deal as I think it is. What do you think? I mean, would you jump out of an airplane, or have you jumped out of an airplane? So got a couple of fitness, gym culture, fitness, thoughts and things that was sent in. And let's go through this first one. I think this one was interesting, that we were looking at someone who was a bodybuilder, and they were compared to some of the martial artists that train in my gym, where the bodybuilder was doing some things, hitting the bag or whatever, and they're moving very stiff. They were not relaxed. They're very stiff. You could tell they had almost too much muscle for the thing they were trying to do, particularly in MMA fighting, some jiu-jitsu. That sort of thing can become a liability almost. But we continue talking about the type of fitness training where in our gym we maintain sort of a CrossFit style, athletic focused training over a visual aesthetic based type training stuff that something like a bodybuilder would do, or your traditional like bro sesh, back and bis, chest and tries, sort of an approach where we are working on supplementing the sports that we do with, the training and stuff. And this one came across from someone who I was having that conversation with, and yeah, let's just check it out.
And back then, who was a bodybuilder, this dude was massive. I mean, when we broke up, he was like 285 pounds.
You never told me about this guy.
But
You've never had an ex-boyfriend?
What? Who's this?
yeah, like he would hurt himself doing the most ridiculous things. If you gain all of your strength and all of your muscle mass through isolation, super controlled, especially machines, you try to do something explosive, like snatch or something like that. Like your tendons and your ligaments are not ready for that stuff. There's no like black and white. Is it this way or that way?
I totally agree with you guys. Some of the people who have the worst habits in the gym are the most jacked men and women that come into the gym. Has been doing bicep curls and isolated movements for years and years and years. It's a hard time to undo a lot of those patterns. Those are the folks who do their kipping pull-ups with their elbow flex the whole time. It's tough to teach them. So yeah, there's definitely a downside to that.
Also, one of the things I struggled with the most, I remember one of the first week we had overhead squats at like 95 pounds, and I looked ridiculous. Like that was one of the most humiliating moments where I had to really humble myself down, where I remember, hey, you have no ability to overhead squat and get yourself in this position. That was the worst.
All right, there's a lot of stuff there aside from the boyfriend joke, but so Yeah, if you are used to one training modality, maybe it's like the bodybuilder type thing where they're talking about, lots of reps in the same sort of pattern over and over for years. And then you try to shift into sport, or you try to, apply that strength or perceived strength or whatever it is into something else that you're now going to try to do. You can run a risk of injury. It's going to happen. I've seen really strong guys try to attempt some wrestling or some jiu-jitsu or some MMA style sport, and they typically are sore, like extremely sore, like they had the worst leg day of their life, or they sustained some sort of small injury, because we're not in our gym, we're not apes, we don't try to murder each other. But it is, jiu-jitsu is full contact to a degree. I mean, you are touching each other and doing things, but I've seen people get injured not from being injured, but from sort of overutilizing something that they've not trained to. Like in the instance of someone who's, what they're talking about is street parking, which is like a CrossFit style programming for workouts, where someone who's the typical gym worker outer, their bodybuilder type approach, they then try to do some CrossFit or whatever, and they realize they don't have the range of motion that they thought they had in their squat and their different positions, and you can injure yourself because, like she says, if you're just training, like for example, I think the example they used was their bicep. If you're just training that bicep and tricep in one direction, then you try to use it, you haven't actually trained the sport of using your body, your tendons, and even your bones to a certain degree haven't caught up with that. Now we see some of that in like fighting, where one of the most standard things that happens in the gym is a dude will come in, he'll be decently fit, you can tell he's worked out and stuff, and you can tell he looks fit. They'll come in, we'll put him on a bag, and the workout of the night will be like a bag routine or whatever, and I'll say like, look man, this is after going over some basics and stuff with him, working for a little bit. We put him on the bag. I'm like, look, do not kick the bag as hard as you can. You're going to want to, there's shin gear over there you can start with, but start slow, start just working on technique or whatever. And immediately they begin just wailing and hitting the bag as hard as they can. I would say like half of them will either not come back or will come back with like their shins hurt, their bruises, they're having a hard time walking or whatever. And now, you could say, well, coach, why don't you stop them? Well, I take the approach of like, well, I told you. And, if you're not going to listen, well, then you'll learn this way. And that's an aside. But I always find that funny because, they're not prepared like a fighter would be. Like after years of hitting that bag with their their fists and their shins and stuff, that gets conditioned, and you need to work on that conditioning. And I can give them the speech until I'm almost passed out red in the face, but it does, they have to learn it on their own. And the other thing he was talking about, the overhead position, one of my, you can maybe we'll get some comments going on this, I don't know, but one of my peeves in that CrossFit is that the overhead position, they put so much emphasis on that overhead position. And while I agree shoulder mobility is very important, it took me, a year to work on my shoulder mobility to the degree to have a good overhead squat or to get that snatch just right. I don't know that that's a minimum thing that people should be working on. I think that's more of an advanced thing for people, and particularly people who are coming to their fitness, 40, 45, 50 years old. Like the overhead squat is not something that they should be focused on, honestly, maybe at all, but depends on your fitness level, or your goals or whatever. But it's just a pet peeve of mine. I've seen the thing where it's like the overhead squat, like testing the overhead squat is not a mobility test to see where they are whenever they first come in the gym. You're trying to see where they are. Like that's not something that you should worry about. And oftentimes I've been into some CrossFit gyms, and that's I can see them like testing someone's mobility with the overhead squat, and it's like, come on, man. I just find it funny. So here's one from Mark Manson again, and this was sent a while back. I didn't make it into one of the earlier videos that I've done, but I did an Instagram reel or whatever a while back talking about, was sort of riffing on something that Goggins did, where I was like, don't get confused, whenever one of us posts something about a hour-long workout or a big thing that we did, we're not necessarily, although probably, but not necessarily bragging, and we're not doing it just to show everyone up. We're doing it, and this is serious, we're doing it to raise the level of our ability to be resilient and to face resistance. So this post was linked in to something that I'd done, and this is Mark Manson saying, you don't build psychological resilience by feeling good all the time. You build psychological resilience by getting better at feeling bad. And he's not wrong. You get tough by withstanding tough things, right? What is the saying? Calm seas don't make a good sailor. It's so true. And this is a cool one, and I wanted to share that with you guys. So staying in the theme of the fitness stuff, this hit my desk from Seal Grinder PT. I followed this guy. I forget his name. Again, I should look this up before I did this podcast, but I did probably 6 months of some of the Seal Grinder workouts, trying to do some SEAL fit, SEAL type training workouts and stuff. This was a few years ago, but this just hit my stuff here. I'm going to read a little bit of it. This is Seal Grinder saying, my text messages got blown up over the weekend with the latest sad news. 5 members of the Tufts University men's lacrosse team remain hospitalized after undergoing a workout modeled after Navy SEALs training. I don't know that they were doing Seal Grinder PT, but maybe they're doing, whatever you think the SEALs should be doing. But on Monday, a Navy SEAL trainee conducted a voluntary 45-minute workout with 50 Tufts players, resulting in 12 of them being sent to a nearby hospital. The dozen players shared a similar diagnosis of rhabdomyolysis, a life-threatening condition that causes muscles to break down. 7 of them were treated in the emergency room and released, while the 5 others remained confined. The workout was led by a Tufts alum who had recently finished the BUDS Navy SEAL training program. First off, sending healing prayers to those athletes put in the hospital. Yeah, wow. Where do I start here, as there is so much to unpack? True. I wrote an article about rhabdo to your blah, 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 blah. Rhabdo can be prevented if you take the proper measures. Stay hydrated, avoid repetitive motion, be in shape for what you're doing. 1 or 2 bad ingredients and you're going to the hospital. At BUDS, you never saw anyone get rhabdo ever, but that is because many safety precautions were taken. So that's not funny yet. It's kind of, but so one of the alum is a Navy SEAL candidate, came back and was like, I'll show you guys how to train, and then trained them all into the rhabdo. I've had, I think, 2 cases confirmed of clients that got rhabdo after some workouts. One was they weren't really a client of mine. They were a friend of a client who came in, and they did Murph with us, and he got rhabdo, I think, from his biceps. He's trying to do the push-ups. Murph, if you're not aware, is a hero workout. CrossFit's famous for, doing hero workouts, but Murph is probably, we joke, it's like CrossFit Christmas, in that comes around on Memorial Day. Everyone does a mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, followed by a mile run, wearing a weight vest if you can. And this guy insisted on wearing his weight vest. He did the run. He came in, got through the pull-ups, started working on the push-ups, and kind of died and went outside and was like throwing up and stuff. And I had told him several times, maybe take off the plate carrier, but he insisted. And he's not my client. He signed a waiver. I've told him multiple times, And then, I heard a couple days later from his friend that, he had to go to the hospital. His arms were hurting so bad. And then he had some rhabdo. Treated him. He's fine. But the other one was a gym member who had been out for a while, who came in and only about 50 push-ups or so. And she had gotten rhabdo. She was a doctor and self-diagnosed it. And it, she swears that's what it was, but turns out it was some rhabdo in her arm, like from her, again, push-ups. So, I'm pretty proud that I've never had more people, even that we've done some SEAL Fit, which is Coach Mark Devine. If you've listened to this podcast or read anything I've written for any length of time, you'll know I've invoked his name a lot. Mentor of mine, big fan. But you build up, right? You need to build people up. You don't just go 0 to 100 in what you're doing. You don't just go from, nothing to 3 a day workouts. You don't just go from nothing to 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats with running, wearing weight vests. You have to build up for that. That's what, he's saying that, SEALs and Buds, he never saw rhabdo once. That's because they, Buds is the famous, week-long Hell Week and all that stuff. But like, you don't just sign the paper and then go to Hell Week. I mean, there's like a year or two of build up, working out, getting there before you go off and do something like that. Just like with our black belt tests in the karate the martial arts that we practice, famously, it's a 3-day test. I've tested my first black belt 3 days, but you don't just go into that having done nothing. You have done previous testing. You've worked out. You have to go to the gym. We have your blood levels tested and all that kind of stuff before you do that. And we make sure you're safe. The same thing in the CrossFit gym. You have to make sure you're safe. If you're not, if you walk in and you see the workout, some crazy hour-long workout, and you've only been there a week or two, hopefully your coach doesn't let you do it. Hopefully your coach scales you down or changes the time frame or has you do some different things. But if, the coach isn't doing that, then you need to take some safety into your own hands too. This is funny in the sense that I bet, they made these guys and gals do this, or maybe they were trying to live up to this guy that was showing off for them or whatever. It's kind of funny. You can protect yourself from this. It's not something to be super afraid of, as long as you sort of take care of yourself. And, ask a coach, ask someone about this. I mean, they may huff and puff and they don't like you bringing the word up, but if it's something you're concerned about, bring it up. I mean, why wouldn't you? And this just got sent to me like yesterday, and they were asking me what they should do if they were ever in this situation or whatever. And you can see this lady was just working out in the gym, and this dude just decides to get in the middle of this workout and act like a dumbass, basically. I mean, you can tell she's got the Muay Thai shorts, if you saw it earlier, or you can see her again here. I mean, she's not like the best, but she's got some skill. I mean, she knows what she's doing. She's throwing those kicks and punches and elbows, and she knows how to post and all that kind of stuff. Like, whatever. The fact that this guy did that is just remarkably dumb. Now, the thing that got me going was, the comments, right? Some of the comments, some are like, I would love to see her spar him, which I would too. He kicks like a girl. She could take him. That's kind of funny. And there's some racial stuff in here, which we won't get into that. But some of them, and I was trying to find one real quick, but not necessarily, but I think they're probably older. Is that they were asking, like, well, how long has she been on that bag? Why is she recording? Recording in the gym is part of the problem. And while it may be, that's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, you can use your big boy words and communicate and ask how long she has left, or ask to work in. You don't just Like, I don't really know what he's doing, if he's trying to make fun of her, if he's trying to show off or whatever. She clearly doesn't give a shit, but she's working and he's not even there. I mean, he's got gloves on. I don't understand it. Someone asked me what they should do in this situation. I mean, not what I would do, because another dude wouldn't necessarily do that to another dude, especially if, someone with skill, a dude with skill is on the bag or whatever. And I will say she has some skill. He does not. I would probably just say, hey, wait your turn. I don't know that I would do anything different than what she is. As far as the recording, I mean, what do you give a shit? Why do you care? Like, maybe she's recording it to send to her instructor. Maybe she's recording it to check her form because she doesn't have a coach. Maybe she's traveling and she's away from her gym and she wants to show that she was doing it or whatever. Maybe she just wants to put it on Instagram. Why do you give a shit? That's what I would say about that. Outside of that, it's funny, and I would like to see her spar him. So I wanted to see if Joey Swole had done a stitch or whatever on that one yet, and it turns out he hasn't actually responded, although he did post something saying a stitch is incoming. On the flip side of that, here's another example from gym world or gym culture. Like, we don't have a gym that's kind of like this, but I know there's a lot of culture that comes out of this type of gym. But this is the flip side of that.
When you do the check pose, you have to push these right here, and then you push. But then tilt. Yeah.
No way. Nah, let's try this.
Kind of funny that. So on the other side of this is how to have a positive actual interaction with someone at the gym. It's an older lady talking to a young man, showing him how to actually do that flex or whatever. And you can actually interact with people in the gym and be respectful and help and stuff like that, which, if you have something to say, in the case of her, she has wisdom to impart. He's willing to accept it. It doesn't matter who it's from. The same would be said in any scenario, as long as you're not an asshole about it. All right. Let's take a look at this article that was sent to me. Finally, something that's not on Instagram, but Keenan Cornelius criticizes Brazilian-run jiu-jitsu academies for cult-like rules. Now, I've had discussions with people in the past about, their dojo being kind of like a cult, or is it culty or whatever. I think people in general are a little too sensitive to this sort of thing. And I know that may sound insensitive, that, well, you don't understand or whatever. Let's look at this guy in particular. So here's what he says. He's got a podcast. I don't want to go find it, but this article's fine on bjjee.com. And here's another thing about some of these jiu-jitsu blogs, is that they just post random crap to just clearly to get clicks or whatever. There's a lot of that in the world, but these websites seem to be sort of overly populated with it. But he says, I get that rules can bring structure to training, but some of these academies treat their students like soldiers, not like individuals there to learn. It's about control, not respect. When you have to ask permission to leave the mat, you're enforcing loyalty to the academy over the actual spirit of jiu-jitsu. That's kind of my problem with a lot of it. He's talking about a push for authenticity. BJJ should be about pushing yourself and respecting others because you want to, not because you're forced to. There's a difference between discipline that aids learning. So I've got this one pulled up. We'll get into that one. Let's take a look at some of this.
So whether you go to one Brazilian academy or another Brazilian academy, it's like you may or may not have to follow these little rules, which is like bowing onto the mats, which I think is a good practice. That's like the bowing onto the mat is like one of the ancient threads from the Japanese judo history, is like you bow, it shows respect. So like we encourage people to do that, but it's not mandatory. Turning away to tie your belt is like another little one. Not asking higher belts to roll. not going for leg locks on upper belts is one that's like super common. It's like if leg locks are not legal in your division, you cannot go for leg locks on upper belts, which we don't do that. Maybe, and some people may disagree with that, but it's like, yes, go for leg locks on the upper belts. If they can't, if an upper,
what the hell? That's kind of what I'm talking about with some of the jiu-jitsu specific stuff. They think you think you're the only martial art in the world that's gone through some of this stuff, right? You're fairly new. It's a newish sport. And calm down. A lot of these details are kind of ridiculous. Here, let's take a look at that Instagram that was in the thing. So sitting properly, just walking across the floor, coming off the floor, cleaning your feet, asking for permission to leave the floor, tying your belt, fixing your gi, your belt, whatever, in front of everyone like you're some kind of slob. So they're saying that, or this guy, whatever, that this is cult-like behavior. I suppose from a strict definition, maybe it is. Not following rules, whatever. But the thing is, the rules are there to instill discipline. Okay? If you're not willing to do the little things correctly in your martial art, are you going to treat the big important things with the same level of respect? I doubt it very seriously. Things like asking to leave the mat, it's a courtesy to your instructor, to your sensei, that you're going to leave the mat. Asking for permission to step onto the mat, to join class, right? First off, you're having to ask permission because why? Because you're late? Probably because you're late, because you spent too much time in the bathroom, or because you were messing around and taking your time and not respecting the start time of the class. Jiu-jitsu, walking on and off the mat with dirty feet, is also kind of, that's not a cult-like behavior. That's like, please don't put your ringworm feet on my face. Like that's something. Sitting, like they're pointing out that like sitting onza or seiza is the proper way to do it. And if you're doing that, it's some kind of cult behavior. There's lots of reasons why you should sit properly. I mean, one of them is don't leave your legs flopping out on the floor so people can trip or whatever, especially when you're, jiu-jitsu schools are typically kind of small. They're usually like 2,000 square feet or so, and you're going to get 30, 40 people in there. You're going to take up room awfully damn quick. Walking on and off, like taking a break to get water, like so that alone, like you can't just leave whenever you want to go get water or whatever you want to do. Are you doing that in the middle of when they're teaching? Are you doing that in the middle of when they're talking? Are you doing that whenever there's a lull, like maybe you're rolling or sparring and you're taking a break? Yeah, we're not talking, people aren't talking about 100% of the time. There's a right time and a right place to do any of the stuff that you want to do, right? Can you adhere to the rules in the middle of instruction or in the middle of a thing? You're just going to like bop out and do what you want. I don't think that's cult-like behavior. I think it's just respect. Like he's talking about bowing before you come on the mat. That shows respect, right? If you can't show tiny examples of respect here and there, respecting the rules means you're also respecting the school and you're respecting everything that they're trying to do. If you are arrogant and you want to just throw that out, then go to a gym or go to a dojo or go to a place that lets you do that. There's a lot of them out there. Don't go to a place where they want to do things a certain way and you don't like it, so you call them names and you get upset. Okay? That's just not how this works. I'm going to say this. There seems to be, at least on the internet, a lot, and this is not just jiu-jitsu, this is across a lot of martial arts. I see it everywhere. But in particular, I see a lot of arrogance coming out of students in this world, because you get a little skill and you think you know everything. The last time I did one of these, I posted where the instructor was teaching the student a technique, and the student was like, "This is never going to work." And he was like, "Well, you want me to show you?" And the guy was like, "Well, it'll never work." And then he wound up like submitting and choking the guy out with the technique, and he passed out. So, maybe perhaps you don't know everything. Maybe perhaps, pay attention to the things. If you get to a certain point and you make a decision in life and you're ready to go, then just go. Don't make a big deal about it. Anyway, I'm sure there's more there for that than I'm sharing, but that's just my 2 cents. All right, in line with that, I found this one, and this is dealing with unprofessional gym members as a fighter, but a lot of these can apply, and I wanted to go through these for my own reasoning. Who's allowing them to train? We recently had an incident in my gym that I'd never had ever, where one member got upset with the other one during sparring class, that he felt like the one member was going a little too hard or something. I don't know, but one guy was brand new, and one guy had been there for like 5 years, and I know they've been training a lot longer than that. Neither one are particularly, great, but the new guy was doing something, I guess, pissing the other person off, and they didn't fight, but they came pretty close. And I took that on myself to be like, because I had chosen in that moment to do some sparring on my own in that class, and that's when that happened, not when I was, actively making the rounds and putting eyes on everybody while they were sparring. And that was a lesson for me. And that goes to this. Number one, who's allowing them to train? And if you've got someone in there who's bullying other people, like I say bullying, I mean like maybe their skill level's up and they're just beating everybody up or whatever, or because they lack control or they're new or whatever, and you're not paying attention to that, that is on you if that happens. And I accept that responsibility. And that was just a lesson that I learned, that I can never, it doesn't matter who you think you have in there, you can't let your guard down. And the other one, this is from the other point of view, which is, let the coach know, let them know what's happening. This is talking about a fight camp. I'm trying to spread it out among just regular talk and stuff, but bring it up. If they're not quite to that level. We had an incident where we had a couple of members that were training for I'm going to call it a fight. It was like a point, not a karate point fight, but like a kickboxing. It was like a no knockout thing. They were all three doing it. And we had a newer guy who was very athletic and he wanted to participate, and we let him in. And I feel like he kind of got, I don't want to say beaten up, because they didn't beat him up, but he got handled pretty easily for like 10 or 15 rounds in a row. And he never came back after that. And I feel like, again, that was on me. I probably shouldn't let him in there, but that is definitely, if that's you and you're that person and you're in that situation getting, smacked around, you should probably bring it up and be like, what's going on? They can check it out. And hopefully the case is that, coach or gym management is not unprofessional. The other thing is, like in the instance that I had where, knowledge is definitely an issue. And I think now, thinking back on it, the newer guy like caught the other guy's leg and took him down where he wasn't expecting that to be in play. And, it's like I told the member who'd been there for a while that, you should have controlled that. You've been here forever. This guy's new. You should expect anything. That's why we say protect yourself at all times. It's called an accident for a reason. I say that all the time in class. So knowledge level or skill level is probably always going to be an issue in any kind of thing that you're going to deal with. Sort of. And then the last thing, perhaps they're just assholes. And I've had a couple come through that were just kind of jerks. They just wanted to hit people hard. They weren't malicious in the terms of like wanting to inflict pain on someone. They just liked the feeling of hitting hard. And, one or two discussions and they didn't change. They had to go. We had to leave him. I had one guy that liked to, as you were sparring, he liked to step on your front foot and then try to hit you. And he did it a couple of times to a couple of other folks. And I was like, all right. And so I got in to spar with him, and he did that. And it's kind of an asshole move. I mean, you know, and he did that. And I said, hey, don't do that anymore. Don't do that to anyone in here. And he said, well, you know, where I trained before, that's self-defense. And we're trained to do that. And I said, well, this isn't self-defense. This is a kickboxing class. This is a sport. And circled back around and came back to him, and he did it to me again. He stepped on my foot, and, you know, it was like, all right, well, now we have to learn a lesson. And he quit soon after that. But sometimes you have to deal with things in nonverbal lessons, and sometimes you can explain things to people, but sometimes people are just assholes. You know, sometimes they're just jerks. They just do jerky shit, and, you know, it's time to go, and that's okay. So there you go. I don't know where that was going or whatever. I just like this post. So I use terms when it comes to martial arts and stuff. We're talking about sport, self-defense, like martial arts, fighting, matches. There's a lot of terms. A lot of them are not interchangeable. Sometimes they are. This thread, we were having a conversation the other day about the difference between like sport and actually fighting. You know, even MMA, even UFC is sport, right? Even though it's like the closest thing to probably really fighting. I mean, like a pro boxing match they call it a fight. Yeah, but they don't roll, they don't wrestle in boxing. Yeah, I get it. But let's talk about that. So this thread, somebody tagged me in this like later on, but this thread, self-defense versus sport is the most tired distinction in martial arts. Sport martial arts means training to compete against other trained martial artists. Self-defense means essentially training to fight untrained people. Any competent sport martial artist will walk through a comparable untrained person 99 times out of 100. The idea that sport martial arts somehow don't work outside of competition is like saying a competitive runner wouldn't outrun a random person outside of a race. We'll get into the second part here, which drives me crazy as well. But yeah, so I've said this a lot. Like, let's take jiu-jitsu. A lot of jiu-jitsu from, say, white to blue belt is really good. Offense and defense, self-defense, like you can use that stuff. I mean, really, against anyone. It's just good shit. And then I've said, you know, anything past that, you begin to play jiu-jitsu against jiu-jitsu, right? Your average person on the street is not going to use an omoplata on you. They're not going to go from triangle to armbar to omoplata. They're not going to hit that triple attack or whatever. This is not going to happen unless they've had the training. So yeah. And then the idea that a sport martial artists can't fight outside of their sport is absolutely ridiculous. And you also assume that sport martial artists don't do anything else. Like if you see just a jiu-jitsu black belt, whatever, and you're like, well, I'm a world-class Muay Thai fighter, whatever, it wouldn't stand a chance. You assume that person doesn't do that stuff too. And they're humans. You can be good at multiple things. Anyway, it's kind of funny, but it is honestly the most tired distinction. I'm tired of it. The other thing here, and this is a little rants, little grief session. The other one here, where we at right here, this part, and you'll see this, like even on some of my things that I've put out there, you'll see a dumbass comment like this. How does training help you when someone sticks a knife in your lung from behind? Fighting is a skill for teenage boys. No grown-ass man should ever be getting in a fight. No shit, Ty the Beard. How does self-defense training help you when someone sticks a knife from behind in the lung? I don't know. How does it help you if someone drops a nuclear bomb on your country? I mean, that's the most asinine statement. Statements like that are why I I dream about punching people when I sleep. I think that's all that needs to be said about that. Anybody with some common sense knows that that's just the dumbass comment. And I love his response. Okay, learning to swim isn't going to help me if I fall off the deck of a cruise ship, but it's still a useful skill. Yeah, no shit. Rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right? Yeah. There's lots of places to go with this. I just wanted to set that up that, use these terms a lot. Self-defense, sport, martial arts, fighting, matches, all this stuff. Yeah, there's nuance in the world. And particularly in martial arts, there's a lot of nuance. So, we should just respect that. So I thought you'd think this one was fun. It was funny for me too. Right. This one was sent to me just a day or two ago. We were talking in class the other night about black belt and what it takes to think like that. And I said something like, brown belts who think like brown belts will never be black belts, right? Brown belts who think like black belts become black belts. And the same person sent me this, and I thought it was interesting. This is jiu-jitsu. You're gonna find most social media stuff is jiu-jitsu really, but it's because I think this industry just likes making content. But let's go through some of these, because these are I think across most martial arts. All right, number one, class attendance is negotiable. That one will not get you far if you think that you can just show up whenever you want or whenever there's something new being taught or whatever. You're not in class training. You're not going to make it very far because you need to be in class. You need to be in class, period. 2, you don't study jiu-jitsu off the mats. You don't study your martial arts off the mats. True. If the 2 or 3 hours a week, that's only 2 or 3 classes, the 2 or 3 hours a week that you go, if you use that as the only time that you participate in this lifestyle, then it's going to take you a long time, a very long time. And played with number 1, so is long blocks of time out of class. I'm going to break it to you. If you are there a lot and then you take time off, when you come back, you're not starting off at ground zero, but in your coach or your sensei's eyes, you are sort of resetting the clock to a certain degree. Okay, because it's not just about what you put in your brain, it's also about how well it's in your brain and how well you can use it. And that fades. It is not like riding a bike. You will forget, you will lose skill. Number 3, you see your development as only your coach's job. It is a two-way street. As a coach, as a sensei, we give a lot. We need you to meet us halfway to make this work. You quit when you get pressured. That's one. I know a lot of people that take a lot of breaks or lack participation whenever there's things that they don't want to do or whenever it gets really hard. In particular, I think this is talking about when you're rolling and you feel pressure or you're getting intensely beat or whatever, and then you quit, you tap. But that's another metaphor for the larger training. You blame outside factors for your losses. It's always someone else's fault. It's always that I couldn't get here on time because there was a train. I couldn't get here on time because blah, 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 I was up late, whatever. You got to get over that. You got to quit making excuses. You chase belts, not skills. Yeah. I'll tell you a secret. I'm kind of a jerk. If I see that that's the main reason why you're here is that you're just trying to get to that next belt, I won't test you. I won't put you in a position where you can get to that next belt until I feel that you are willing to just be. And I have one student in particular right now that has turned that corner, and I can tell they've fallen in love with it, and they're just there to train. And I want to promote them so badly. They just have a little bit left to go to get that skill, and that's what we're here for. 7, you avoid the tough rounds in the gym, or you avoid the tough things. Like I also have more than one student that they dislike the self-defense aspect of what we do. They don't like the super physical part. They would rather train on their own. They'd rather hit a bag. They'd rather do their katas. They'd rather do things in the air. They'd rather think about the mental aspect or whatever, but they don't want to actually get their hands dirty by doing the hard rounds and hard things to get to that level. Now, again, we're not talking about beginners. We're talking about people who are trying to get to that black belt. And the only way to conquer something is to go through it, right? That's how that works. That's part of the process of becoming a black belt. You don't risk losing in order to be great. You've got to take those risks. Now, there's also one of the guiding principles in the Shotokan from Funakoshi, which is think not of winning, think rather of not losing. And I don't know that these are the same thing. I don't think they're in conflict with each other, because one's talking about life and the life and death situations, whereas one is talking about just climbing the ranks. 9, you don't ask for feedback. Yeah, you stick to yourself. You don't ever talk about how to get better. You don't even with your peers or whatever. Maybe you're arrogant. I don't know what it is. Yeah, you should ask for feedback. And the last one here, your change, the thing you're working on weekly. You change the things you're working on weekly. So you gotta really work on the things that you suck at, right? I think 8, 9, and 10 could probably go together. I don't know, but you've got to work on the things that you're not good at. You just have to. You can't ignore those things. If there's some aspect of your sport or your game that you're not great at, you have to come in and drill them. If there's a particular piece of a kata that you're not good at, pull that one piece out and do it over and over and over and over and over until you can't get it wrong. That's how that works. This guy, I think I've used him in some other of these reaction things before. I was talking with someone about being lonely the other day, that they're surrounded by all these people that they work with, and they're surrounded by all these friends and things like that, but they still feel lonely at the end of the day. And this popped up in my feed, and I wanted to go through this a little bit because it made me feel good too. But just to see how some of that might work.
See so many people who have jobs, even have girlfriends, boyfriends, have friends, and they feel so incredibly lonely. And if I'm lonely, like I need to put myself out there. So what I'm going to do is transform myself. I'm going to focus on my social skills. I'm going to get a good haircut. I'm going to learn how to dress. I'm going to start working out. I'm going to become professionally successful. And now that I've become something that I can be proud of, I'm going to go interact with other people and look at, they're going to love me because now I'm sexy and I'm successful and I know how to talk to people, and I'm going to talk to them in this way, and I'm going to do eye contact, and I'm going to do all of the things.
Why are you doing that accent?
To connect with you, to make you like me, right? Now you're laughing, so now I feel okay because now I know, oh, Steven's laughing. He likes me. I'm likable. So what we actually do is we create a false version of ourselves for people to love. And that's what really screws us, because they don't fall in love with us. They don't like us. They don't like the broken, pathetic kid that I used to be. They like this glossy, polished version.
So true. I was listening to a podcaster talking about a podcaster, and he was sort of meta there. And he was talking about how the person was very upset with themselves because of all the rules and the way that they said they were and who they said they were on their show. Now they had to work at living up to that, and it was crushing them. And that it was a lot of work to live up to that ideal that they'd sort of told the world that they were. And yeah, I bet that's exhausting. And I think that's what he's talking about. I think at the end of the day, you're going to feel lonely. You're going to feel less about yourself because you're not as authentic as you could be. You are doing the things that you think other people expect from you. right? And then you got to live up to those things. And I think that's exhausting. And I know people that do that. I used to be like that. I used to think I had to be a certain way in the professional sphere I was working in. Sort of like I had to create and work this public persona because we were producing events and we had, 800, 1,000 people or whatever coming to these events and stuff. And like, you're going to be on stage, you're doing an MC thing, you're talking to these, who you feel like are famous people. They're not really like I talk about jujitsu and martial arts and stuff a lot on this. If your average human being meets some jujitsu, world-class black belt competitor, they're not going to know who they are. You're not that famous. There's a level of this stuff. At the end of the day, these people, nobody knows these people but me and the small, 0.005% of people in the world that I hang out with know these people. So why am I working on this so hard? It's because you want people to like you. And I think that's what he's getting at, is that you should be your authentic you. You should, even this, like I should talk to you during this like I would talk to you if we were in person. And I hope I do that. If anybody listens to this and they're like, bro, you sound completely different than you do when we talk, tell me, let me know, because I definitely want to try to be authentic, because I've lived this. I've done this before and it sucks. And at the end of the day, you're exhausted and it feels terrible. So what would a good warrior mindset podcast be if I did not invoke Mark Divine or Jocko Willink? At some point, I can't do one without that. Here is one that, this is an old one. When was this from? This might be from, I don't even remember. This might be from 2 or 3 years ago. I did one of these episodes with someone. I think it was with my friend Carl Smith, where we talk about imposter syndrome. It might have been with Greg Hilton, who I work with at SoCo. We're talking about imposter syndrome. And this has been in my library since then. Someone sent this to me. Hey, did you hear Jocko talking about imposter syndrome? And man, I'll be damned if this isn't a cool take on it. This is not a direction that I had thought of before when it comes to imposter syndrome. And I really dig this. So let's see what you think.
Yeah, a lot of people look at imposter syndrome like it's a bad thing. I look at it like a good thing. Actually, the minute that you get your purple belt and you're like, oh, you're damn right, I deserve this. It's long enough. It's long enough I've been waiting. You're wrong. I like the attitude like everyone talking about here. You get the purple belt, you're like, oh, dude, I need to start working even harder. That's imposter syndrome, and it's good. You get promoted into a new position at work, and you're like, oh, man, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I gotta do some study and make sure I understand the procedures and make sure I get into work before everyone else and stay a little bit later. Imposter syndrome's good as far as I'm concerned. And listen, whatever you got put into for a reason. They put you there for a reason. Whether you got promoted, you're like, I don't think I'm ready. You didn't get promoted if you weren't ready. You might have to grow into it a little bit. That's why you're going to work hard. So take advantage of that imposter syndrome. Go bust your ass and turn into a badass. Make sense?
What's up? What a great message about imposter syndrome, that it can actually be harnessed as a good thing. My sensei's told this story about another student tested for black belt. He asked, he does this famously, are you excited or are you nervous before when you test for a next belt level? And he says that, like, if you're nervous, it means you're scared. I mean, if you're nervous, it means you care. And that's so true. If you truly care about something, you're going to be a little bit nervous about getting it wrong. You're going to work harder to get it right. And that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about harnessing that, turning it into a positive thing, taking a fault and making it used for positive outcomes. And that is badass. And if you can't listen to Jocko and be left with a motivating, positive message, then you should get to work on yourself a little bit more. But I love that one, and I'm going to take that one into my week. and try to harness something that might be normally thought of as a weakness of myself and try to turn it into something that can be perceived as positive. On that note, I think that's enough for one day. I hope some of these made you think. That's my goal here. So send me some stuff. If you find some stuff, send it. I would love to look at it. I would love to talk about it. I'll talk with you about it. Let's get into it. Send it in. You can hit the website, send it in that way. You could hit me on Instagram, Facebook, just about anywhere, and send it on in. Yeah. Until next time, get after it, y'all.